I don't know how to explain that you should care about disabled people.
I'm just here to give my disclaimer for this video. It is not a perfect video at all. If I had more time where I felt well enough to work on this video in this week, it would probably be to a better standard, but also I am just struggling to engage with this topic anymore. After this point, I am genuinely going to have to stop because I have been the most unwell this week that I've been in quite a while. I've really not been sleeping very well. My appetite is near gone. I'm very nauseous. I'm just exhausted, and my chest pains have been back to the point that I've just not felt well enough to do a lot of things. So I have spent a lot of time on this video already. I would have spent more if I had felt more well, but this is a real thing going on, and I'm just trying to use the tools I have to try and make a difference. I also wanted to inform you all before you got into the video, I am a very liberal blocker. I'm not taking any shit on this video, and that's if I haven't already locked down the comments as it is. Like, I'm just not doing it. This video is being put out there so more people can see and hear disabled people's point of view in a different format. I think being able to hear and see people speak about things is really impactful. So, I don't know, I hope that maybe my video will make some people understand what the fear is, what the risk is with this, and go and take this opportunity to digest more media on this topic, but from people who are more educated than I am, who are more well informed than I am, and who are more able to put together something that is easy to understand but also detailed and real. And also I thought maybe I should acknowledge Dispatches, the documentary in quotation marks, that also came out recently to continue to demonise disabled people, or generally people on benefits. I've obviously not watched it and I don't plan to, but many people who have watched it have said that the guy presenting the documentary basically only spoke to people who are in very, very, very rare circumstances when it comes to benefits, such as like legacy benefits, and he did not speak to anybody who is struggling, you know, any of the people who are using food banks, the people who can't afford food or to put their heating on, but also just generally a lot of the calculations are either completely incorrect or just extremely misleading. Yeah, introductory to my video is fuck everybody who got involved with that. I hope you rot in hell. So here is my video of me being miserable and emotionally impacted by this shitty thing. See you next week.
Hi pals, it's me Artie, they them pronouns only. And my video this week is kind of just processing some of the stuff going on in the UK politically, to be honest, when it comes to disabled people in particular. There's a lot going on here when it comes to disabled people and what our futures are going to look like in the UK. In particular, there's an assisted dying bill that's passed its first round of I don't know, debates, etc. There's so many processes in politics that I don't really fully understand, but I understand it's not fully okayed at this point, and there's a lot of work still to be done. But also the government are arguing about changing the way benefits work in the UK, mostly sounding like for the worse, and forcing people into work. I personally struggle to engage with these topics Because to me, it's obvious, it's clear, you should care about other people. You should care about disabled people. And you should care about what they're saying and the concerns they have, and see where similar things have gone badly in other countries. I watched the BBC documentary Better Off Dead, ? By and starring Liz Carr, who I know from when she used to be in Silent Witness. But in her documentary Better Off Dead explains the issues with assisted dying, assisted suicide bills better than I can, really. And it did only come out in May of this year, 2024. So really, I urge you to go and watch that if you haven't yet, because yeah, it's just put a lot more clearly and simply than I could ever really even try to explain. And I will have a link in the description of this video, although it's likely only accessible to UK people unless you have a VPN, because the link I have is for, I think, Channel 4's streaming platform. And I find this stuff hard to discuss because I've always been quite a slow processor, and I've always been very deeply emotionally affected by topics that are just generally a bit inhumane, cruelty to humans and animals, but obviously as well, especially things that directly impact me and people I know and care about. And any of those conversations I've had in the past with people has usually involved the idea that you're not allowed to be emotional about things you discuss or debate, and that removes your credibility for the argument. I have never felt that was true or made any sense. And honestly, now I see it as one of the many techniques
of oppression.
And also the way that people phrase their poor arguments, really, can be hard to argue back with. They often use a lot of techniques that make it difficult to really argue back. Lots of distractions. Things like straw man arguments are one of many examples. There was a really good, I think, Grammarly article on those different kinds of arguments that I will link as well, because it was just really helpful for me to be able to actually see things that have been used against me in the past, how they're meant to be used, how they're meant to work, and what they're called. It just felt very validating for me. So yeah, for this video I'm just going to talk through some of my thoughts, and I don't claim to be an expert by any means, and I am only talking from my own point of view and what I have personally learned. It is interesting to me that both of these bills, or whatever they're called, have come up at the same time or very similar time. I think we all know that many laws or schemes brought in seem very narrow initially, but they do tend to expand. Whether that's the plan from the beginning, which I personally think it is, or whether it's something that ends up just sliding in that direction because there's not enough clear safeguarding and actual physical ways to safeguard these things. I don't really think it matters what the intention is initially, but they do tend to end up in the same place. The getting people back to work thing has its focus on mental health and is making job coaching available as part of mental health services, but it's likely to slide into other kinds of disabilities as well. Obviously I'm mentally ill too, but again, I don't really know a lot on that specifically, because I am a certain brand of unhinged that if anyone tries to come near me with ideas that I have already either tried or know are not good for me, I will be a problem. So, but I do understand and see that this could generally slide into physical disabilities and long-term illnesses. The discussion of rolling back benefits as well and cracking down on fraud, which people continually remind the government that benefits fraud is literally at 0%, whilst conflating PIP, which is personal independence payments, with means tested benefits, which I can't name them all off the top of my head, but it's things like universal credit, or like my adult social care support is means tested. But yeah, conflating PIP with means tested benefits and considering the idea of vouchers instead of actual money being the new process for personal independence payment is terrible. All of this very, very nicely slides into the assisted dying bill. Those who can't work will likely lose their benefits and will deteriorate trying to make up for that loss. As a side note for that as well, trying to access any kinds of benefits in the UK is actually extremely difficult. I do not get universal credit because of how poorly I was treated when I went through that process and how badly set up it was as a service for disabled people. This was just before COVID as well. They refused to do anything virtually or on the phone, even though they didn't have enough parking at their job centre location for me to be able to drive and park. And because I'm rural, there's only one train an hour, and if it's cancelled then you're fucked. And that, like, those things happened multiple times. So I basically told them to shove it up their asses because it was just terrible the way that they initially lied to me, but then continued to be inaccessible for a disabled person. So I never went through with that completely. I have had PIP since I think around 2016. Every time has been hard. The first time I've had a reassessment was truly vile. Like, my assessor was so awful to me. These are just things I haven't even spoken about online because they were so bad. I struggle to think or talk about them without getting very angry or crying. That time as well, they took all of my benefits away. They took all of my PIP money away, which also was only the absolute bare minimum of standard daily living. I wasn't getting much initially, and they just took it away. And I had gained, I think, at least 2, if not 3, pretty severe, long-term, incurable diagnoses, including my Crohn's disease and my Takayasu's. And they took it off me. We did an MR, which is a mandatory reconsideration, and I got the bare minimum back. And then my next assessment 2 years later, I think 2 years, 3, I don't know. I actually ended up getting more because someone actually kind of listened to me, but also reading through the reports are often just genuinely complete lies, and reading the reports themselves are extremely traumatizing to me, because like, it's one thing having a interaction with somebody who doesn't believe you and is gaslighting you, it's another to read a full report lying or twisting what you said. My tip is always record everything, for one, and always have someone to be an advocate or a support for those assessments. But yeah, like, these things very easily slide into, many people will have their benefits taken off of them because they either no longer qualify or meet the criteria, or they're just one of the easiest ones to remove it from because they have weird and complicated diagnoses people don't understand, or it will likely be a lot of mentally ill people and neurodivergent people getting their PIP taken away from them because of this whole access to work kind of thing. But like, people will get more sick having their benefits taken off of them, and also those who can kind of force themselves to work will continue to deteriorate as well, because work is honestly 99% of the time just not accommodating for any disability at all. Many people will not feel they have much choice for what to do next, where they can access help and where they can get treatment. They will likely lose their homes, and then what? Then what do they do? In the UK, we've already taken winter fuel allowances off of many elderly and disabled people in the UK. The NHS has massive waiting lists. They aren't staffed by doctors as much anymore and are being staffed by PAs and AAs, which they keep changing what the acronyms mean, but generally it's a physician associate, and I think anesthesia associate, something like that. It's the anesthesia role. And these people only get 2 years of medical education and should not be a role used in the way that it has been used a lot in the NHS so far. And many of them are also being paid more than fully qualified doctors or doctors who have at least passed medical school. Many of our UK health staff are quitting due to burnout or disability from COVID. They are turning to private healthcare to work or becoming locums, because locums are paid far more than if you're a standard regular member of staff, or they are actually just literally leaving the country and finding work in places like Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Those are sort of the top ones that I've seen doctors talking about on Twitter/X. I don't know how to explain to people that none of this is necessary. Why are we so okay with suffering and pulling up your bootstraps to get through it? Why are we okay with gritting your teeth and carrying on? Why don't we want to help people? If I could prevent other people going through the hardships that I've been through, I would. If I had children, I wouldn't want them to face the same things I've faced. I would want something better for them and everybody else's children. I want better for all of us now. And I just don't understand why that's not a common thought or common enough to make a difference, make an impact on our society and how we run our countries. If we look at issues in this way, many things would be different. If you properly funded the NHS and adequately hired enough staff, that would mean that they would work less but for more money. They would have more time to rest and also keep up their education, which is one of the many factors in people constantly dying or getting sicker due to ignorant doctors. More funding into research. People actually want to see researched. If we had more research done on pain management or pain treatment methods, and what causes the pain that we experience, we could improve many people's lives and likely prevent many people from even wanting or needing hospice care or assisted dying. I don't understand why we haven't fully legalised medical cannabis, why it is not more readily available on the NHS to people in pain before we are trying to legalise assisted dying. You know that I have been paying for private medical cannabis treatment for nearly 2 years now because I ran out of options available to me, and I know that they are studying, they are doing research, they are writing reports about how medical cannabis is or is not helping people so that they can try to get it more readily available on the NHS in future. So why is that not the same thing that's being done with assisted dying? Why are we not looking at research or examples from other countries and what's happened? And why are we not researching and studying those thoughts, feelings and concerns here before readily legalising it? Funding end-of-life care as well would make a huge difference, because currently most, if not all of it, is managed by charities. We are letting people down who are terminally ill because the care isn't there, and many people are not afforded adequate medical intervention for pain, whether they are end of life or not. And then also, of course, like, my medical cannabis suggestion is just one of many options. I am not super familiar with what hospice care is like, what kind of pain treatments they do provide those patients. But I know there's many pain treatments that we are not easily afforded through our healthcare system, often depending on factors like, are you a woman? Are you white? Are you fat? What kind of disability do you have, and do we believe that you're actually in pain, or do we think you're a drug seeker? Do you have history of addiction? A lot of those things change whether you will be believed and afforded adequate care. I know that there are other things available both on the NHS and privately that I have seen other people access with similar conditions or the same conditions that I have, including lidocaine infusions, ketamine infusions, the ketamine nasal sprays. Those are usually for mental health, but still, like, I would say emotional and mental pain is still pain that needs to be treated. Botox as well is one that seems to be near impossible to access on the NHS, but actually can be really helpful for a lot of people. Low dose naltrexone, which I talked about a while ago in a video that my local rheumatologist wouldn't let me try. I could go and do it myself anyway if I wanted to, but I wanted to have supervision of someone in my team, but I was denied that. So instead of low dose naltrexone to try, I went on to medical cannabis instead. There are lots of things out there that are being developed as well past that, and I think I remember reading somewhere that many things that have been studied and recognised take somewhere around 10 to 15 years to actually enter the general knowledge of healthcare. There is also the issue of every country has to do their own studies, I think. I mean, that's how it works in the UK, that just because America or Australia or Japan, etc., have done studies on the same thing and found good results, we would still have to conduct our own studies to confirm that before we actually used those products for that condition. One example, I think, is I'm on adalimumab injections for my Crohn's disease, but it is found in America to be one of the most effective treatments for Takayasu's as well, and is actually the first thing that they tend to use in America for Takayasu's. However, in England, they do not really at all use adalimumab for Takayasu's, and the first port of call is usually infliximab infusions instead. And I'm now at a point where if my Crohn's disease is deemed as in remission, I'm concerned that that may cause my gastro team to forcibly take me off of my adalimumab injections, even though we have no idea what that would do to my Takayasu's. This is a hypothetical situation. It has not happened. Nobody has said anything like that to me yet. But it is a fear I have that just because of certain guidelines in England say this thing, I would not be allowed to stay on that medication, possibly if the condition it is okayed for has been deemed in remission. I also have the fears of coming off of medications that have been working for me will no longer work if I need them again, and also having a flare-up that may have been avoided if I could have stayed on the right medication that was working. There's a lot of factors to it that are really annoying and frustrating. I think I've talked about some of them in some of my old Crohn's disease videos, but there's many annoying complexities and bureaucracy involved in healthcare, both for the patients and for the medical staff, that honestly just really gets in the way of a lot of people's treatment, and is likely large part of deteriorating health and quality of life. I would also say properly funding social care would mean more disabled people could get the support they need at home. They would be able to remain independent for longer with the right support, but we are not interested in doing that, and the process to getting to that point is extremely hard. That's also something I've been alluding to in some recent videos and haven't really gone into fully yet. My experience though made me suicidal. And I have been waiting and fighting that battle since August of 2023. And I'd only finally gotten any support in place by mid-ish October of 2024. There has been a complete, I wouldn't even really say misunderstanding, a lack of a want to understand how my health impacts me, how things like autism and ADHD impact me, and my abilities to get through these kinds of processes that involve a lot of admin work, form filling, reading complex language, and having to read a lot of things that actually just don't really say anything. I would also say COVID precautions. COVID is not gone and is still killing and disabling people. Why are we so invested in ignoring this? Ignoring all the studies that have been conducted and are still being conducted, not allowing the vaccine to be readily available to everyone, and having a very tight criteria for who is allowed it. Earlier this year, where I was switching between mercaptopurine to azathioprine, which are both chemo drugs, even though I was still on at the time my adalimumab, which is a biologic that does suppress your immune system, and steroids, which also suppress your immune system, because they didn't have this third medication on my file, I supposedly wasn't meeting the criteria anymore for clinically vulnerable, which I don't understand how. I don't know how that makes any sense when I'm on 3 immunosuppressive medications. I did end up getting the vaccine, but I had to argue quite a lot, and then they booked it in my mum's name instead, who is not on any of those meds. So
to make this even more clear, this is from the government website that was also recently updated in May of this year as well. My GP practice blamed NHS England, I guess, for the fact that I hadn't been invited and supposedly didn't meet their recommendations. It quite clearly states that immunocompromised people are at least eligible for boosters, but may also be eligible for specialist COVID treatments as well. And further down the page, it talks about how if you are immunocompromised and age over 6 months old, you're eligible for vaccination treatments for COVID. And then once again clearly clarifies the 3 main groups of people who are eligible for the COVID-19 vaccines. And that does include immunocompromised people.
But I think that the vaccine should be available to everybody who wants them. There are a lot of people out there who want to get vaccinated but cannot because they are just not allowed. We are still not encouraging or enforcing masking again or testing, and we are still fine and okay with everybody coming into work or school ill, like actively sick. If we had actually invested in air purification systems in all public buildings, but especially things like hospitals, government buildings, social care buildings, social housing, things like that, obviously schools as well, universities, that would also actually on its own cut the risk of COVID by a very large amount. I don't know the exact statistics, but I do remember reading about that. If I can find it, I will provide that information. So why aren't we wearing masks in hospitals or on public transport or going to the GP? Why aren't any of the medical staff masking? Many of us are having our appointments cancelled because all the staff are ill. We've been waiting for the appointments for weeks, months, sometimes even years, because they are getting sick, likely from being at work more than anything else. What is this resistance we all have to giving a shit about other people and other people's well-being, and honestly even our own well-being? I don't get it. What is the resistance to taxing the rich by a teeny tiny amount, or taxing massive corporations? Like a small percent would honestly probably fund most of these things very quickly. Why don't we want to do that? And why are average people arguing against taxing like rich and massive corporations? Many people's personal stories about why they are for assisted dying 90% of the time comes down to something that could have been provided by one of the above things I mentioned. Provided or avoided because of the above things I've mentioned. Many of the people as well, somebody I follow on Twitter, we're mutuals, said it really well. A lot of people are tokenizing deceased sick people that they knew. I'm gonna have to find that so I can actually quote that, because it was a very good explanation. My friend said, I've noticed a lot of tokenizing of dead sick people with this. So many, my mum would have wanted this and not. My sick relative and I spoke often about their desire to die with aid before they were taken by their illness, and that contextual absence, why did I say absence like that, is loud and glaring. And that was a response to somebody else saying, you're once again not listening to disabled people. Stop talking and listen. Stop typing and listen. Stop filming and listen. Stop putting your anecdotal experience of having a sick loved one above the reality of the systemic culling of disabled people. Many people want to die because they are in so much pain. Well, invest in pain treatment. Or people want to die because of other horrible symptoms like chronic nausea. And a lot of these conversations as well from those people tokenizing dead loved ones are often, 90% of the time, have been, it's somebody they know who had cancer, and usually a lot of the time people with cancer feel so bad because of chemotherapy, not the cancer. There are obviously, of course, exceptions to that as well, where the cancer itself is extremely painful, but a lot of the times it's actually the chemotherapy that makes people more unwell than the cancer itself, at least outwardly. But also, cannabis has been used for this particular purpose for a very long time. It's used regularly for pain management, help to sleep, helping with nausea, and helping people feel able to eat food, particularly when they have cancer and are undergoing cancer treatments. And I mean, Grace Helbig last year was one of the people relying on medical cannabis, or cannabis, I don't know, I guess it's just cannabis in America anyway. She was relying on it a lot when she was going through breast cancer and chemotherapy last year. Her doctor as well actually encouraged her to do that. So it's not a new phenomena to do things like that. Like, my first instinct when it comes to this predicament, assisted dying versus improving end-of-life care or pain treatments, would be interrogating what happened in those circumstances of people who had really, really awful end-of-life experiences. Like, what was it that caused that pain? Was it their medications they were on? What were they on? Would they have been open to other treatments to help with the pain that they were in? Are there other things that could have been put in place to help, rather than going straight to assisted dying? I also really can't grasp how quite a few people on the left have been saying that those people who are against assisted dying have fallen for right-wing rhetoric. I don't know how to tell you in a way that you will comprehend that you are actually the ones falling for right-wing rhetoric. I haven't seen much opposing assisted dying in the UK from the right-wing folk, to be honest, and that is likely due to my algorithm. I do know that the assisted dying vote here was very split. There was a lot of, there was just a lot of division. It was not too far off being a draw. It was about 60 votes difference. And I am also just generally disappointed to see that all of the Green MPs voted for assisted dying. But I do tend to find that the Green Party's weak spot is disabled people, and it always has been. Something that keeps coming back for Brighton in particular, who were the first people to have a Green MP, is that they always talk about wanting to make the city walkable, which is likely to cause issues for disabled people who live there or want to go to Brighton, because not everywhere is accessible to a majority of disabled people in Brighton in particular. Whilst that might be a greener policy and there's safeguards that they could put in to help make it so that disabled people aren't impacted by that, the likelihood would be that they just wouldn't include those things. And also, I've seen all over Sussex a lot of disabled parking bays have been removed in favour of electric car charging point bays. They don't put in new disabled parking, and they always use up the best/closest parking spaces to wherever it is that you would need to be accessing as a disabled person for those bays. They've already spent millions of pounds on advertising the campaign for assisted dying, which could have literally just gone to fund the NHS or any services in our benefit system instead. But no, we're glamorizing assisted dying / assisted suicide on the tube, where many people do kill themselves by jumping in front of a tube train. When I had my stay at Maytree, which is it's like a sanctuary for the suicidal, you spend like 5 days there and spend a lot of time doing talking therapy and stuff like that. One of the volunteers I met was a man who had spent majority of his life as a train driver. So I don't really know how anyone could okay this particular advertisement that says, "My dying wish is my family won't see me suffer and I won't have to," with a woman in silk pajamas looking happy and dancing around like it's a hair care or skincare advert. When also recently we were told, linked to the getting disabled people back into work, recently we had Kim Leadbeater suggest that the fear of being a burden is a legitimate reason for choosing to die. That is one of our MPs who was bringing the assisted dying bill to Parliament and has not grasped the subtleties of societal coercion, but also one of the promotional materials for getting people back into work from and by the Labour Party. Oh, looks like they've actually removed the post now. But on the 26th of November, I saw people talking about it. UK Labour described out-of-work disabled people as written off. And yeah, that tweet no longer exists, so I don't know what exactly happened with that. Maybe they got so much backlash, they just took it down. However, they're still happy to let disabled people die. With some of the things that have been said by a lot of leftists and people in charge and GPs and other doctors online, on Twitter in particular, I did decide to try to stay off Twitter a bit recently, because some of the things people have said are so vile and violent about disabled people. I definitely had a wobbly and was very direct with how I felt about these things. One of them was commenting on the right-wing talking points of this, and someone just goes, "Are the right-wing talking points in the room with us?" And really they just set themselves up for that. Yeah, it's you. Rather than listening to any disabled people, you are here to redirect the conversation in the same way that many right-wingers do. And another one was just talking about how horrible and ableist everything to do with this was, and a woman entered my replies talking about how it's only meant to be for people who have under 6 months, which is always it's a guesswork. Nobody knows how long people have. It's honestly always just a guess. But also how it's meant for people in unimaginable pain. They as well were talking about a family member who had died due to cancer, and it just really, that statement alone shows that you, for one, have no idea who I am and what I've been through personally, but you also have no idea about other disabled people's lives and existence in the UK. Some of my highlights of the worst pain imaginable that I have been through are dislocating my shoulder recently. The numerous times I've dislocated my ribs, and nobody believes you. When I had an abscess in my butt cheek, and then I had to have a hole in my arse, and every single time, like, I had to be further sedated for every day that I had to get the wound repacked and redressed, because the pain alone from removing and putting in gauze was like fire. I was screaming in that nurse's room. The first time I had a cervical screening, where a nurse just ripped open my cervix with no warning, no sedation, nothing. Again, I screamed so much and so loudly that everybody in the waiting room could hear me. The time I got erythema nodosum, which is generally among the population rare, but among people with Crohn's disease is actually quite common. It felt like I was being electrocuted up my arms and my legs, and there was no way to stop it or predict it, and the only thing that helped was steroids. I sat in A&E for 12 hours and had to come back the next day because they didn't have a gastro consultant on call. And then I don't have a fucking pulse in my arm. I am one of about 3,000 people in the world with Takayasu's. And like, I don't generally expect anybody to know all those things about me because, for one, some of those things I've not really talked about at all. And of course, this was Twitter and not YouTube, for example, where I have talked about a lot of those things. But to assume that I don't know what that worst pain imaginable is like is absurd. Crohn's flares alone are so painful. Like, you cannot actually imagine that pain until you've been in it. You cannot imagine pain until you have experienced it yourself. And I think this is what a lot of non-disabled people do not understand. And this is a thing that we all joke about in the chronically ill disabled community of like, what amount of pain are you in? Oh, the normal amount. The normal amount of pain is no pain. Our whole lives have been in pain. Or at least majority of our lives have been in pain. And we thought it was normal. We thought everybody experienced some kind of pain like this chronically, every day, most of their lives, if not all of their lives. Whereas non-disabled people, more often than not, assume that the horrific pain that we go through, or the annoying as fuck, debilitating day-to-day pain we're going through, is made up, or is we're being hyperbolic. I don't know if I've said that right, but you just don't believe us because you have no reference for this pain. And that is the large part of this problem. The majority of people speaking for assisted dying are non-disabled people. There are some disabled people, like I won't say there are none, but majority are non-disabled people. And intellectually, I understand why we do things in the way that we've been doing them and why we're doing them right now with this assisted dying bill. And intellectually, I understand why that is happening. Because we are selfish and we hate people for no reason. Like, our society hates people. But personally, I cannot understand it. I can't understand this. Generally, I would say for people who are similar to me, in a similar position to me, or you're an ally and understand these things, and you're listening and believing the things that we're saying and the things we're concerned about, I really encourage you to do something. Like, even just one little thing, just to do something. You can contact your MP. I did this a few days ago, which led to me actually doing this video, especially if they did vote for the bill. Mine did, and that's why I emailed him. And also included a link to the documentary by Liz Carr, because the rest of his policies generally are very much pro-funding the NHS, pro-funding social services and adult social care and things like that. So I feel like a lot of people are not inherently understanding that this bill, in the context of our society, is not as good as it sounds. And we need to try and get some people to understand that. Tell your MP your concerns. Tell them what you do want funding. What is an alternative thing that you would like to be researched and funded instead of an assisted dying bill? And like, I know things don't really change from admin related political efforts like emailing MPs. Like, to be honest, I fail to really believe or understand that those things happen, as well as signing petitions, especially these days. But they can at least start engaging other people in the conversation more. And actually, this is why a lot of my political work is here on YouTube or on my blog or Instagram and places like that, and in my artwork. I think I do more to share my experiences and my work. You know, my experiences in healthcare, my experiences of the benefits system and social care in the UK, because that's the one thing that I feel like can at least reach other people. And it's something that I can do. There are lots of things that I cannot do when it comes to political work, protesting, and also as well big protests. I'm not doing anything. If we want to look at Palestine, how many of those marches have we had in the UK, the whole world, but like particularly the UK, who are still doing basically F all about what's going on? How many of those have we had, and how many people have shown up over this last more than a year now, since October 7th of last year? And like, nothing has changed. But like, those protests are not doing anything. I think I can do more here and in my work by shining a light on things like the way we're represented in media, because that is a lot of people's introduction to disabled people. And also, speaking of my own experiences, that is where I can do more than anywhere else. I do highly respect disabled people who do protest in person. Again, I don't have a great understanding of disabled political history, and a lot of it is usually still very American-centred rather than the UK. I think many people now have done sit-ins and lie-ins and die-ins in different places. In America, a lot of disabled activists worked with the Black Panthers. They crawled up the front steps of the White House, but there are also many groups in the UK who have been doing things kind of like this that are good for attracting some media attention, because otherwise they're not reporting on us. They're not reporting on it. Things like the young trans people who have been protesting a lot this year since the puberty blockers were banned, where they have occupied buildings and had signs. They've let crickets free on transphobic conferences. They did a lie-in demonstration in the middle of Victoria train station in London. Of course, we also have Just Stop Oil, before they were arrested, and have been arrested for several years as well for doing very minor things compared to the racist riots we had in the summer. And also the lesbians who abseiled through Parliament because of Section 28. If you know groups like that, then I encourage you to see how you can help and support them, because if you can, you should. But they also often don't really organise or talk about the work they do online because everything is monitored. There are a lot of independent news outlets now who are covering these issues a lot better than mainstream media outlets. If you would like some examples, I'll try to find some, but if you have any of your own, feel free to leave those in the comments. Like, I really don't know what the issue is. I can guess at a few issues for this as to why we on the left are not fighting back more and why we are always just infighting. Like, I have some theories and some of them are definitely true, but I don't know which ones in particular are the most effective as to why this whole thing has been so awful and been getting worse. A lot of people clearly have been indoctrinated a little bit into eugenics, which always happens after a global pandemic. I mean, the treatment of people in the AIDS crisis and afterwards, and as well as the Spanish flu. Again, not something I personally know a ton of, but I have read into some of those things, of course, and watched documentaries. So we're in the post, even though the pandemic is still going, we're in sort of like a post-pandemic fascism ping back, and everybody feels okay with eugenics at the moment. That's how it feels to be a disabled person in the world right now. Please watch that documentary by Liz Carr, because she explains further how the assisted dying in Canada went from something very small and narrow and only for a specific criteria out to including homeless people. And I feel like you need a reminder that it just takes one bad thing to happen to cause you to become homeless. Yeah, I don't know how to do this. There have been so many things like this in politics over the years, whether it's something that directly affects my communities or other marginalised communities. I don't know how to get through to people who aren't already at least open and generally somewhat aware. And that has always been something that continues to upset and frustrate me, is how do we prevent people from falling down those right-wing pipelines? And if they have, how do we bring them back? And yeah, my communist socialist arse is showing here, because I just don't know, I just don't understand what the problem is. We use the excuse of capitalism and saving money, but actually all of these things that they do are not actually saving money. Assisted dying might be saving money for the NHS, but a lot of the things they're doing to the benefits side of things is not saving money. Cracking down on the fraud that doesn't exist, hiring people to stalk disabled people, hiring investigators and things like that, that's not saving money. That's spending more money to penalise people who do not deserve it. It is so hard to get people in the DWP to believe you when you say you are disabled, even with all the documentation in the world. So if people are managing to fraud the DWP for benefits that are pocket money, by the way, they don't cover shit most of the time, I cannot do anything but applaud you. And do you know what? I'm going to throw my socialist arse out there again. If we had a universal income, this wouldn't even be an argument. If they're struggling, they wouldn't need to pretend to have disabilities and try to get piss benefits. and it would all be a general, like, I don't know, a lot of our problems would just be solved with a 4-day work week. And a universal income.
I want to acknowledge briefly before I get to the end of this video, this is not a perfect video on this topic, and it wasn't intended to be, and I think because it is so huge and vast and very personal to me, it's hard to really be able to share the different points of view and information in a coherent and cohesive way. I've done my best, but also I wanted to just briefly acknowledge the fact that we do have, I believe, an international day where disabled people mourn dead disabled people due to filicide. It is the Disability Day of Mourning, and it is a memorial to those who were disabled and were victims of filicide. So every year on March 1st, the disability community comes together to remember the victims of filicide. Filicide is the legal term for a parent murdering their child in the disability community. Filicide is used when talking about a parent or other relative or household member killing a child or adult relative with a disability by action or inaction. Legally, these cases are categorized as murder, manslaughter, or simply homicide. So, it is a very real fear for a lot of people. If it's not our healthcare systems, our social care systems, our governments, it's literally our families and caretakers. Yeah, I don't know, I feel like that's something that is required for some context as well.
Yeah, I could go on, because this is so connected to a million other things that are also still so screwed up in my country. But I will stop there, because otherwise I would literally never stop talking. Why don't we care about people? And this is going to be a spicy video to try and upload to YouTube, depending what the algorithm thinks of it and what the people who find me think of it. But this is all I've got. I don't have power. I don't have a huge audience. I don't have that kind of influence. I have my phone, an internet connection, and a big mouth. I have brutal honesty, but also compassion for the human race. Somehow still. Every awful thing that happens makes me upset and wonder where humanity is going to go, but I will never lose hope. My hope might not look like the fluffy, light, happy hope that we all think of, but my hope is the angry refusal to accept that this is just the way humans are, because I just don't believe it. That's my video for this week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.